Salvaging in Star Citizen can be a very satisfying gameplay loop, not to mention a fantastic way of earning credits in-game, but getting started with how to do it can be a little daunting. This video will run through what you need to know to start salvaging in-game, ranging from the tools of the trade, the types of salvaging, the intricacies of different ships involved, as well as options for hand salvage. There are timestamps in the video description to help you find what you're looking for, and this guide is accurate as at Star Citizen Alpha 4.3. If you're new here, I'm Forrester, and this YouTube channel is all about giving you useful or interesting videos around simulation type games, including Star Citizen. And if this sort of video is helpful, you might like to subscribe to the channel so that YouTube knows to show you more videos like this in future. So let's start by covering what you'll need in order to get started with salvaging in Star Citizen. There are two broad categories here, including hand salvaging or ship-based salvaging. For the former, you'll need a multi-tool along with a Cambio Light SRT attachment or the larger hand salvage tool. You may also want some canisters to store RMC. For ship-based salvaging, you'll need either the Drake Vulture or MISC Fortune solo salvage ship, or the Aegis Reclaimer, a multi-crew salvage ship, although with a lot of seat hopping, the Reclaimer can also be used solo. The three main salvages are available for purchase in-game with Alpha UEC, and as at patch 4.3 the Fortune is 1.9 million credits, the Vulture is 2.6 million credits, and the Reclaimer is just shy of 32 million Alpha UEC, but these prices could always change in future patches. For ship-based salvage, it's also worth having a multi-tool with tractor beam attachment. If you forgot one, you can craft one using the ship salvage terminals, but it's more expensive than just bringing one with you. To get started, you'll need something to salvage. You can come across derelict ships or salvage panels in the verse, destroy ships yourself to create salvage opportunities, or alternatively take out a salvage contract. Many people choose to take out the contract as one of the faster or more reliable ways to find a salvage target, at least whilst you're getting started. Contracts in the General tab are the easiest way and generally fall into three categories for small, medium and large salvage contracts. If it's your first time out since the last mini-wipe, you may need to complete the smaller size contracts first to build your reputation before moving on to the largest hulks. Contracts in the Unverified tab, as with many of the others, are a little more sketchy. That's not to say there's anything wrong with taking those contracts, but you might have more of a timer attached before law enforcement pop along to see what's going on. Alternatively, you might look for salvage panels or destroyed ships as cheaper salvage options. The first salvage type mechanic is component stripping. This features in the guide before hull scraping for the simple reason that it can be done without much specialist gear, simply a tractor beam, and since some wrecks may carry some high value cargo that can be carted off for sale. Depending on the legality of said cargo, you might need to sell to a fence rather than a reputable retailer. For grabbing either cargo or weapons or components from a hulk, you'll need your handy multi-tool tractor beam. With the tractor beam in hand, left click to pick up to your target, whether it be a cargo box or weapon or component. For the latter, you may see an orange arrow appear on screen which indicates the direction you need to move the tractor beam in order to detach the component. Then you simply bring the item to your ship for storage, preferably somewhere safe. You can use the mouse wheel to control the distance of your tractor beam and hold the R key on your keyboard to rotate items for neat placement. You can snap items to your grid, indicated by a highlight. Cargo will generally snap neatly, weapons and components may take up more space to snap. Weapons sell to a weapon store planetside, and components would sell to a component store. Basically, the places where you'd buy them, you'd go to sell them. Alternatively, you could choose to sell to players, as some of the components can be more in demand. Some people choose to skip this step. Ultimately, it's not really where the biggest money is anymore, but it can be a good way to find some otherwise rare components. Basically, it's for you to decide whether you want to strip the carcass to the bone, or if you prefer to focus on the meatiest parts. The mainstay of salvage is the hull scraping mechanic. You fire a salvage beam from your ship, targeting the wreck, and basically scrape away the materials from the surface. This gives you Recycled Material Composite, hereby referred to as RMC, which can be sold at most major TDD outposts. The UI is similar for the solo salvage ships and the Reclaimer, with the differences covered later in this video, and by entering salvage mode, by default pressing M to do so. Activating the scraper module fires a beam towards the surface of a target, and essentially this paints the target over time, stripping away the hull after a few seconds of firing the salvage beam and leaving a satisfying stripped wreck behind. You activate the scraper by left clicking with the mouse. To help you in painting beautiful patterns on the wrecks you encounter, there are some cues which tell you how the salvage beam is performing. There's a percentage on the HUD which gives you a feel for how much material is left where you're currently pointed, with that percentage reducing as you scrape away the hull. You can also get a general feel for this by looking at the highlight around the section of the ship that you're targeting, which starts out blue and green indicating a high amount of salvage, reducing to yellow, and eventually to red when a third or less salvage remains. Below that is a CSU indicator, which is how much material is currently heading to your internal storage. This dial shows per salvage head based on where the salvage head is currently pointing, so in the Vulture you'll see 2, and in the Reclaimer and Fortune you'll just see 1. There's also a range indicator to ensure you're firing your salvage beam within range to the target. Also on the HUD, you'll see an indicator of the internal storage aboard, currently 13 SCU in the Vulture and Fortune and 240 SCU in the Reclaimer. Once this fills to full, you'll need to take some action to clear it, which will be covered in each ship section of this video. For each scraper module, you'll also see 3 statistics: the diameter, speed, and efficiency. The diameter is how much hull is covered by the salvage beam, with more diameter meaning you can cover more of the hull with the spread. The speed is how quickly the beam works, and the efficiency is how much of the material you recover. Think of it as like choosing the right tool for painting a room. You can do much more detailed and intricate things with a fine paintbrush, but you'd also be there for hours. You might prefer to use a big brush or even a paint roller to get the job done more quickly, but accept that you might have gaps left behind. Generally, I tend to use the abrade module in the Vulture and Fortune and swap between the trawler and abrade modules in the Reclaimer. That may involve buying a different module from an in-game store for about 20,000 credits and swapping it in. How much you choose to scrape the hull depends on your own choices about how much RMC you'd like to get, and is inevitably a trade-off between efficiency and time, as well as how much you enjoy the gameplay loop. To me, it's a satisfying experience, so I usually prioritise hull scraping over structural salvage, not least because RMC tends to be more valuable per unit of cargo than construction materials. To actually find a hull to scrape, you could pick a contract from the Contracts tab, but it's much more effective to simply find abandoned hulls in the verse or create your own by destroying some ships. As of patch 4.3, some of the best options are finding whale fall like a destroyed Idris or Polaris, which can yield huge amounts of RMC. As well as actual hulls, it's also possible to find salvage panels in the verse, usually in the sort of asteroid fields you'd find mining rocks. These panels are great for stocking up on relatively large amounts of RMC without having to pay for a contract or destroy a ship. Community tools like Regolith can give hints on where to find them, but the Aran Halo asteroid belt in the middle of Stanton can be a good bet. When scanning, look for signatures that are a multiple of 2000, which is a strong indicator that a given find is likely to be salvage panels. The panels come in different sizes. Generally, I target the largest panels, which look a bit like a big rectangle that's curled in on itself. Those largest panels hold around 5 to 6 SCU of RMC. There are medium-sized panels which look a little like an arrowhead and hold 2 to 3 SCU of RMC. And the smallest panels look like a thin strip and carry about half an SCU of RMC. Salvage panels only carry RMC and can't be fractured for construction materials. Structural salvage is the biggest step in the salvage journey, which involves completely breaking up the hull into smaller chunks and then dissolving those chunks into construction materials which can be sold on. Those CMs can be sold in a similar way to RMC. There are two phases to structural salvage. The first is to use the fracture and disintegrate mode to break up the targets into smaller chunks. In the solo ships, enter the mode by pressing Alt and W from the mining mode, or in the Reclaimer by entering the claw seat and pressing M. If you end up in the disintegration mode, just right click to switch it back over to fracturing. Once in fracturing mode, left click to activate the fracture field, hovering over the target so that you see a visible note on the UI to say it's fracturing, as well as an indication of how many SCUs of construction materials are aboard. You need to be within range, the ship needs to be powered off, and you need to be facing the target to fracture it. Once fracturing is complete, you'll see the target break up into smaller chunks, which is where you need to switch to the disintegration mode. That can be done with the right mouse button. This works in a similar way. Left click to activate the mode and then see a visual indicator for how that's progressing and an estimated yield. The slight difference here is that you'll also see a percentage indicated, which is the efficiency of your current position. You can improve this by moving to an optimal distance and facing the target better, and naturally, using ship-borne tractor beams to help with that can be a real plus. The extent to which it's worth optimizing for the percentage of salvage probably depends on the size of the target you're aiming for. Perhaps for one SCU it might not be worth worrying about, but for a big hulk could make a big difference to your bottom line. And finally here, your internal filler size does matter, especially for larger wrecks. Inevitably, most of the material you capture is likely to be construction materials from this salvage phase, so check you have enough space in the internal hopper before disintegrating your target. The smaller salvage ships are more limited in the size of target that they can fracture and disintegrate, with the largest of targets requiring a reclaimer. Whichever ship you're using, eventually your internal hopper will be full and you'll need to empty it to make space, and ultimately to generate the boxes you want to sell. The user interface is very similar in each ship. You head to the location of the hopper, select whether you want to eject RMC or CM, and then press to eject. That pushes out a box that you can move around and store as appropriate, and reduces the internal hopper storage by the appropriate amount. There's a checkbox to auto-eject the next box, which can help if you're stacking up multiple jobs, and is especially useful in the Fortune, where the ship will automatically place the crate on the cargo grid and continue ejecting the next. The Vulture is designed as a solo platform, although to some extent it can work with a second player too, if they're happy to do some of the cargo juggling in the back and on the wreck itself. All of the salvage functions are controlled from the pilot seat, with the exception of emptying the hopper. It's a very convenient experience for running salvage. There are two sets of salvage heads on the Vulture, one left and one right of the forks in the front of the ship. Right-clicking in salvage mode swaps between the two sets of heads. The default loadout equips the cinch scraper modules on the first set, and alternately a tractor beam and a braid module on the second set. You can also enable or disable salvage heads individually by pressing Alt and A or D, which can be helpful if you want to use or not use the tractor beam on the alternate loadout. My preferred Vulture loadout is 2 braid modules and swapping the tractor beam onto the alternative loadout. Most people will use gimbal mode in the Vulture to more easily aim both heads at the same spot. The Vulture salvage heads are capable of doing any job, but the fracturing and disintegration modes will not work on the biggest of ships, so if you're struggling to break up a huge target, you'd need to use the Reclaimer for that. To switch between the fracturing and disintegration modes and the salvage mode in the Vulture, the hotkey is Alt and W, and then switching functions between modes is by right-clicking. The exit hopper is on the cargo deck and spits out 1 SCU boxes. There's 12 SCUs of storage available on the cargo grid, although judicious players can fit more boxes aboard by using the gangway space available. Personally, I usually bring back 36 SCU, with 23 in the back and 13 in the hopper, but some players are happy to risk more. The Vulture can be purchased up from Lorville for 2.6 million Alpha UEC. The newer MISC Fortune is also designed as a solo platform and makes more sense to use as such. It just carries a single salvage head compared to the 2 on the Vulture, although in the current patch that's inexplicably twice as fast, so the actual salvage speed ends up being similar. The unique feature of the Fortune is that the hoppers on auto-eject will automatically populate the external cargo grid with 6 SCUs on either side. That means that it's possible to fill up the 13 SCU hopper and 12 SCU side-mounted cargo grid without ever leaving the seat, which is arguably a little more efficient than the Vulture, where you have to pop down the way. As with the Vulture, the hoppers spit out 1 SCU boxes. Also, as with the Vulture, the Scraper can do any job, but the fracturing and disintegration modes are limited by the size of the target, so the largest targets require a Reclaimer. To switch between the fracturing and disintegration modes and the salvage mode, the hotkey is Alt and W, and then switching functions between modes is by right-clicking. The Fortune can be picked up from Lorville for 1.9 million Alpha UEC in-game, which comes in marginally cheaper than the Vulture. My personal loadout for the Fortune would be the tractor beam as stock, and swapping the cinch out to replace it with an abrade module instead. The Reclaimer is designed as a multi-crew ship, and so the functions aboard are split into different stations across the ship. The pilot seat is separate to the salvage turrets, which are separate to the claw, which does the fracturing and disintegration. The stations can work together well with a well-coordinated team, especially as the salvage turrets incorporate an alternate tractor beam by default. There are 2 salvage turrets located on chairs behind the pilot chair on either side of the bridge. Enter the turret by powering up the station and then selecting Enter Remote Turret. The default loadout is a tractor module and the trawler scraper module, which seems to work well for the Reclaimer. The claw seat is located next to the pilot chair on the right of the cockpit, and the claw is activated by sitting in the seat, powering up the station, and pressing M to start fracturing mode. Switch to disintegration mode by right-clicking. The tractor beam stations can move fractured sections of the hull to an optimal position for the claw to disintegrate through careful teamwork. The exit hopper is right at the back of the ship on the salvage deck, some walk away from the bridge. There are 2 salvage hoppers on opposite sides of the room, capable of ejecting RMC or CM crates, but also at different sizes, ranging up to 16 SCU crates. These can be stored on the cargo grid, either within the salvage room or down in the cargo hold. Alternatively, there are plenty of places aboard to store loose boxes for the Brave, so it's quite feasible to have a considerable number of boxes stored aboard before heading back to sell up. It's also possible to operate the Reclaimer solo, which many players do in order to make use of the large contract capability. It just involves walking between stations during each stage of the salvage journey. It's less efficient than when multi-crewing the ship, but arguably more effective than using a solo Vulture for the largest of contracts. The Reclaimer is currently the most expensive salvager in game, at a price just shy of 32 million Alpha UEC from Lorville. The final salvage option is hand salvage using a multi-tool. This is by far and away the rarest method, as it's just not on the same scale as the other methods, but it's worth including here for completeness, and to mention that RMC salvage in this way can theoretically be used to patch up and repair hulls in game. You need the multi-tool, Cambiolite SRT attachment, and some Cambiolite canisters for storing the RMC. Alternatively, there is a dedicated tool called the Cambio SRT, which is a little larger. Locate your salvage target, whip out the multi-tool, and once the UI goes green to indicate you're in range, left-click to start salvaging. The hull scraping works similar to the ship-based system, and you'll see an indicator on the green wheel to show when you're not grabbing any more materials. The laser automatically cuts out if your canister is full, at which point press R to reload an empty canister from your suit inventory. You might need to swap around full and empty canisters, much as you would do ammunition magazines. Incidentally, you can switch to the repair mode by right-clicking if you're one of the few people who wants to use that mode. Hopefully this has been a useful video guide on the art of salvage in Star Citizen. If so, you might press that like button or share your experiences in the video comments, especially if there's anything you'd like to hear more about. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, clicking that whilst you're there might be a wise move, but otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.